VisualPolitik community, Saturday 20th of April will go down in history as one of the most important days of 2024. After months and months of deadlocks, accusations, and tough negotiations, the House of Representatives finally gave the green light to continue military and financial assistance to Ukraine. We are talking about a huge spending package of some $60 billion that will very soon start flowing over the battlefront in Ukraine. Trumpism, furious with the decision taken by the House of Representatives, could not ultimately prevent what, one way or another, is going to become a huge political success for Joe Biden and, more importantly, for the defense of Ukraine.
We have been working in good faith around the clock every single day for months and weeks, and over the last several days, quite literally around the clock to get that job done.
Now, the speaker, who was put in place by Trumpism, is having to deal with harsh criticism. But what does this new aid package to Ukraine mean? Will it be enough? How far does the commitment set by Congress go? How could this measure change the direction of the war? Well, we're going to take a look at that right now.
Months of terror.
I think it's safe to say that the last few months have been some of the most difficult of the entire war for Ukraine. The disruption of much of the arms supply has left them on the ropes.
The consequences of inaction every day in Ukraine are dire.
In Kyiv, they've been living with the fear that the US Congress would not approve the $60 billion aid package to Ukraine requested by the Biden administration. Without the money, and especially without American weapons, the situation on the front lines was getting very difficult. And remember that this is something that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky himself has not hesitated to acknowledge. In a recent interview with the Washington Post, he could not have bbeen clearer.
If there is no US support, it means that we have no air defense, no Patriot missiles, no jammers for electronic warfare, no 155mm artillery rounds. It means we will go back, retreat, step by step.
In another PBS interview, he was even more emphatic.
Without this help, we have no chance of winning. Russian artillery can fire 10 shells for every one fired by Ukraine.
And it's certainly not just the Ukrainians. CIA Director William Burns has been very clear about what could happen without US help. Check it out.
There is a very real risk that the Ukrainians could lose on the battlefield by the end of 2024.
Ammunition, missiles, even anti-aircraft systems. Everything has been in short supply in recent months. Good evidence of this is that in early April, the Russians managed to destroy the largest Kyiv power plant because the Ukrainians simply did not have enough anti-aircraft capacity. They ran out of shells. In fact, the situation was so bad that the Russians have not only made some advances and caused heavy losses among the Ukrainian ranks, but also seem to have started preparing for a new offensive. But VisualPolitik community, now things have changed. The Pentagon and the Ukrainian armed forces have been working together for months to define the new military requirements. All that was missing was the funding, and now, at last, the green light is on. A huge avalanche of new military equipment deliveries to Ukraine will soon begin, starting with the most pressing supply of all. Listen up.
Game change.
As NATO's Supreme Allied Commander has already said, the close of 2023 and the beginning of 2024 has been terribly hard for Ukraine. The shortage of ammunition has made it very difficult for the long-suffering Ukrainian troops. For example, its artillery systems went from firing 10,000 shells per day to only 2,000. And this is actually more significant than it might seem to us at first glance. The number of shells is absolutely key for defending the front line. In fact, the Ukrainian withdrawal from the city of Avdiivka had much to do precisely with the inability to protect the Ukrainian defense lines, since they did not have enough artillery to counter the Russian attacks and stop their advance. But now, fortunately, things could be starting to change again, and not only due to US funding. In recent months, the Czech Republic has led an initiative to purchase ammunition from around the world, which, along with local production being financed by the European Union itself, is causing ammunition to start arriving in Ukraine again in even greater quantities than expected. For example, while the Czech government initially located 800,000 projectiles that could be purchased for about $1.5 billion, now another 700,000 units have been found at a cost of about $1.8 billion. So, Allied money is now flowing in to fund these operations, and obviously the search for new supplies continues, which will surely cause that figure to increase. Of course, the operation is not immediate. Deliveries will progressively arrive in Ukraine over the next few months. But with that in mind, the Ukrainian military began to increase the use of its current stockpile. And now, following the approval of the US aid package, the restrictions will practically disappear for quite a while. In other words, to the chagrin of the Russians, the Ukrainian guns are going to roar again. Because after the green light from Congress, it is almost certain that the White House and the Pentagon will send hundreds of thousands of artillery shells to Ukraine. These shells will be in addition to the Czech plan and other deliveries from the European Union. In total, we are talking about millions of shells that would end Ukrainian shortages for more than a year. For example, it is estimated that Ukrainian troops could again fire just over 6,000 shells per day, triple what they have been firing in the first months of 2024. And yes, they will likely still fall short of the estimated 10,000 or so shells Russia is estimated to fire each day. But Ukraine has a much higher accuracy rate and a lower error rate in its favor. That would practically even the playing field. In the same vein, given that they will now have ammunition, the Ukrainian army has set to work to get its artillery teams back to working at full capacity. And best of all, they are doing it at home. For example, the M777 Towed howitzers have begun to be repaired in Ukraine, with parts and spare parts largely from Ukrainian companies. In other words, in recent months, many local companies have been gearing up to be able to repair the war equipment within the country and manufacture the spare parts needed. Naturally, this is making the process much faster. Well, the point is that these are two major changes. That is, the arrival of large quantities of ammunition on the one hand, and the repair domestically of much of the artillery equipment they use most often on the other, may give the Ukrainians a chance to stabilize the front, while new, more advanced equipment arrives and new war plans are prepared. This is why artillery is so important in this war. It is basically the way to secure and stabilize the front line while the rest of the military equipment is being prepared. But that is not the end of the good news. In recent months, the Ukrainian industry has greatly expanded the production of drones armed with explosive devices. Today, it is estimated that the Ukrainians are already producing more than 50,000 drones per month, far more than Russia is managing to produce. What's more, the goal is that production will soon reach a rate of 1 million drones per year. And yes, it is true that we are talking about a system that apparently has much less punch. The explosive charge of these drones is a quarter of that of the artillery shells. That is to say, they are not a perfect substitute, but they do help to reduce the gap between the shots that Ukraine can make and those that Russia makes. In fact, the Ukrainian strategy consists of the following. First, they carry out a heavy artillery attack, and when the Russian troops scatter to protect themselves, the Ukrainians launch huge waves of armed drones. And so, although they are less able to hit hard, they can hit more accurately against poorly protected units. The ultimate goal right now, Ukrainian planners hope that this strategy will allow them to cause up to 100,000 casualties among Russian troops. In fact, this happens to be the number of casualties that is expected to scuttle any attempt by Moscow to launch a new offensive. In short, as far as artillery and the front line are concerned, things are starting to change again. And of course, following the green light from the US Congress, all kinds of equipment will soon start arriving in Ukraine, an avalanche of suppliers of all kinds, including many more units of the US Army tactical system. And keep in mind that Ukrainian troops already have a lot of perfectly identified potential targets, such as airports, air defense systems, command centers, and arsenals. Well, now all these targets will be in the firing line of the new strike force. This is certainly bad news for Russia, but it's not just about the United States. Given all the latest upcoming announcements, we could see the largest deliveries of military equipment of the entire war. As we've already told you here on VisualPolitik, under the leadership of French President Emmanuel Macron, Europeans seem to be about to go the extra mile. The ultimate goal of all plans? For Kyiv to put back on the table the possibility of resuming the initiative by the end of 2024 or early 2025. And yes, precisely this timeline would perfectly follow the deadlines established by the Estonian plan, which we have already discussed at length on this channel. Of course, besides weapons and money, there is another issue that Ukraine has to solve. What am I talking about? Well, listen up.
The human factor.
By far, the worst thing about the slowdown in US aid to Ukraine in recent months is that it has caused a wholly unnecessary erosion among the Ukrainian ranks. The lack of ammunition and equipment has not only greatly reduced the morale of the troops, but has caused many casualties that could have been avoided. And in wars, ammunition can be replaced, bought, or manufactured, but obviously the same is not true for soldiers. After more than 2 years of war, with tens and tens of thousands killed and hundreds of thousands wounded, Ukraine is facing a significant shortage of military personnel. In fact, this shortage has been forcing them to move their best units from one part of the front to another. For example, the battalions of the 3rd Assault Brigade, which are some of the most powerful units in the Ukrainian army, have had to fight in Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Kupiansk almost without a break. Evidently, this greatly erodes their military capabilities, casualties, fatigue, lack of morale.
People are not robots. They are exhausted, physically and psychologically, especially in combat conditions. For example, those people who arrived at military recruitment centers in February 2022 need rest and treatment.
In December 2023, the military asked the government for 500,000 additional soldiers. Later, Ukraine's new commander-in-chief, General Oleksandr Syrskyi, reduced that figure. But in any case, if one thing is clear, it is that troops are needed. Therefore, the government is now trying to enact new laws to expand the recruitment of new military personnel. For example, the mobilization age has been lowered from 27 to 25, and more incentives for soldiers have been approved. But obviously, it is not that easy. The suffering of the war has gone on too long, and most Ukrainian families have already felt the pain of war in their family tree. New recruits are becoming fewer and fewer. In fact, new laws have also had to be passed to strengthen recruitments. For example, an electronic database is being established with all men eligible for conscription. The Ministry of Defense will now be able to use telephone numbers, addresses, and other information from other Ukrainian government agencies to identify and locate all eligible persons who have not yet registered with the recruiting offices. Likewise, to reduce corruption, it has also been proposed that all persons with a medical dispensation will have to undergo a fresh examination. Even so, the recruitment age in Ukraine is unusually high, 25 years, compared to 18 years in most countries, so there is room. What's more, support for the government and for continuing the war remains extremely high among the Ukrainian population, and of course, the arrival of new equipment and new funding may stem the bleeding we have seen. A stronger and better funded military will boost morale, reduce casualties, and facilitate the recruitment and training of new troops. On top of that, in recent months, the Ukrainian armed forces have also achieved some significant successes. They have shot down numerous Russian aircraft and have not failed to punish the already meager Russian Black Sea Fleet. VisualPolitik community, the last few months have been very hard, but now things might stabilize in favor of Ukraine. Both Europe and the United States are ramping up their military production, and in a few months, they could be ready to give much more assistance to Ukraine. Things may be moving too slowly, but at least some progress is being made. Not surprisingly, Ukraine's attrition is high, and things could get even worse in the coming weeks. After all, it is likely that Russia wants to bring forward some of the offensives they have planned before Western assistance arrives. In any case, these would be passing winds. There is confidence that in 2025, they could be in better shape. Obviously, it won't be that simple. The Russians are also on the move, and are practically putting their entire economy at the service of the war.
Russia is reconstituting that force far faster than our initial estimates suggested. The army is actually now larger, by 15%, than it was when it invaded Ukraine.
Of course, the Russian army is less well equipped, and its troops have less experience and training. But as you can see, they have not stood still. On the contrary, they are adding 30,000 new military personnel to their armed forces every month. In any case, the most important thing here is that if Western aid is restored and maintained, Russia will never be able to win this war. Sooner or later, the Kremlin will have no choice but to ask itself a question: how on earth do we escape from Ukraine? But at this point, the question is for you. Will the new aid to Ukraine alter the course of the war? Leave us your impressions in the comments. And now, if you found this video interesting, please like it. All the best. See you soon.